afternoon. I'm Ellie Wolmark, and welcome to the ICM Research in Focus podcast series. Today I have with me the members of the wonderful Women's Plus Cancer PPIE group to talk about why being a part of the group and engaged with cancer research is so important to them. We here at the CR UK Cambridge Centre at the University of Cambridge are so grateful to have this amazing group of people and all our patient representatives involved in so many of our research projects and so many different ways. But today I want to hear from them about why they do it and what they get from it. First of all, I'm going to go to Panagiotta, and please could you tell me a bit about your story and then share with me your topic that you're going to tell us about this evening. Thank you.
Hello. So my name is Panagiotta, and I've been an ovarian cancer patient since January 2021. In my personal life, for more than 20 years, I was a research scientist in astrophysics, and then more recently I moved to educational assessment, where I continue to work. My husband and I have a daughter. So as I said, I was diagnosed in January 2021 after having a variety of symptoms for about 6 to 7 months. I called the GP several times. This was kind of COVID time, so you had to call. And so a GP once during this period, due to having what I described, the discomfort and pain also in the abdominal and the lower chest area. The GP eventually tested me for bowel cancer with negative results, and they basically then didn't do anything after that for a while. And in all this time, my CA1 to 5, which is indicative of, it's very sensitive to ovarian cancer, was not tested once. Eventually, after a while, I called my GP again because I had this very persistent pain on my lower left chest side. And I was asked to go urgently to hospital because they were suspecting that I might have pulmonary embolism. So the investigation was run by the emergency department and a very, very thorough radiologist. I can't say happily, but it was good this person was there, which showed that I had a stage 3C ovarian cancer, quite spread, or very spread, I must say, and not pulmonary embolism. So my CA1 to 5 at this stage was 3,600, which is like 100 times more and more from the normal level. So if the GP at any point during those 6 months had tested me once, they would have seen that, there was really cancer, there was a problem, and, things might have been different. But anyway, so after the diagnosis, I went through chemotherapy because the cancer was spread and inoperable, then operation, and then chemotherapy. Then it all worked well. I was I had no sign of the disease, and that lasted for about 3 years. And in those 3 years, I was prescribed and was taking niraparib, which is a PARP inhibitor. The cancer returned last year, and since then, I had another operation and 6 rounds of chemotherapy, and I'm good at the moment. There is no sign of the disease currently. So that gives me a bit of hope anyway. So anyway, my diagnosis was very dramatic and very, from one day to the next, it was just terrible for me. I was quite upset about the whole thing, and I was in a terrible shock and quite a bit of despair. I lived through it with the support of my family, but still it was the whole situation was very heavy on me. Then during that time, I was asked if I wanted to participate in research in relation to my cancer, and this somehow led to Marilyn phoning me and asking me if I want to participate to the patient group, which I said that I would. And I must say that at that time I thought, do I really have time to spare? I am so sick. Can I participate in a group? And I'm so happy I did say yes, because that was a transformative moment from me. Because, after the diagnosis, you look at all the information and the statistics, and it's all very bleak and overwhelming, especially for somebody like me, which is in such a late stage. So what meeting Marilyn and also the other ladies in the group, and especially the other ladies in the group, what it taught me is to put everything in perspective, that every patient is different, every path is different, even though we all have the same disease. And yes, there is quite a lot of loss when you have ovarian cancer, obviously, but there is also life. And these ladies that I met through this group, they were all living and enjoying their lives, despite the fact that they had ovarian cancer, some even in higher stages than me. So they were enjoying their lives despite the diagnosis, the gruesome treatment, and everything else that entails. So this group took me out of a dark place, I must say, with their support and the sharing and the positivity in such a difficult situation. So I am very grateful that I was made aware that such a group existed, and that I was made part of it. So in this group, except of the support that we provide each other and the help we give each other, some other aspects that we are involved in is working with researchers. And by this, I don't mean that we can, in any way provide insight into the biological side of their research, but we have researchers come and talk to us about their research. And what we provide is our understanding of what they tell us, and also how we think the research might impact patients, when they receive the treatment, for example, or from the emotional and psychological side of things. The other thing that we have been involved is looking at leaflets for patients, because when you're first diagnosed, you are given a lot of information on ovarian cancer and leaflets. And so we gave our opinions to the researchers on how to make those leaflets a bit more clearer, so that it is easier for patients to understand those. We have participated in conferences. Marilyn keeps inviting us to the conferences she is organizing, which is really great. And we're not just spectators. Obviously, we're not biologists. We're not scientists who work on, cancer research. But, from every talk, there is a patient perspective there also. So from that perspective, we can ask questions, we can give opinions, and we feel that our opinions and our views are very much appreciated from the researchers. One example I've written down here is that we participated in a workshop for AI, for example, to help identify tumors in scans. So that was quite nice, quite interesting for us. Personally, my treatment has so far been the standard treatment. So I wasn't part of a clinical trial ever. My participation in research was from the point of view that I donated tumor bloods, etc., for research. And also when I was taking niraparib as a treatment, I was part of a UK clinical practice experience on the tolerability of niraparib by patients. So all of that was part of the learning that was relevant to me, let's say, through this group. I must say that when I was first diagnosed with, stage 3C, etc., my daughter was a first-year student at university, and I'm still here. She has graduated. She's working on immunotherapy for cancer. So I find that quite amazing.
That is amazing and wonderful. And I'm
Yeah,
so happy that part of your, horrible situation has led to another brilliant brain being engaged in cancer research that cannot be anything other than wonderfully positive. So that's wonderful.
well, anyway, that's what she chose to do. I don't know if it is. I don't know if it is related to my experience, but I'm just glad that I am here to see that, to see her grow up and do what she wants to do with her life. The other thing is, as I said, the PPI participation is now an integral part of my life, and I will continue with it as long as I'm here. I'm happy to work on outreach and to speak to other patients as these things happen. I talked a little bit about the PARP inhibitors, which are relatively new treatments, so we're still learning about them and how they affect patients, etc. And the other thing that I want to mention is we participate in fundraising events. For example, myself and some of the science team at my work, we participated on the Shine night walk in Cambridge in 2022, and we raised quite a big sum of money for cancer research.
Thank you so much for your involvement and participation, Panayota. It's wonderful that your voice is heard and that we have you engaged with us. So thank you.
No, no, not at all.
And second, we have Fiona. I'm going to pass over to you, Fiona.
Hi, I'm Fiona Barvey. I have ovarian cancer. I was diagnosed 8 years ago now. What actually happened to me was that I had a discomfort. And when I say discomfort, it wasn't a major pain in my abdomen, my stomach area. I managed to get a GP appointment after a holiday, and the GP basically was very on the ball. She took a blood test, and within a week, I found out that my CA125, which is a type of marker, but not a brilliant marker for ovarian cancer, was raised. I was then put on to an ultrasound in my local hospital. And from there, I very rapidly was sent to Addenbrooke's to have further investigations, CT scan, internal, etc. Within literally 3 to 4 weeks of my first appointment with the GP, I was unfortunately diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. And what then happened was I had surgery, which removed all of the cancer. So at that point, it's called NED, no evidence of disease, which was fantastic. I then went on to have chemotherapy, 6 cycles, and another drug called Basuvimab, or Avastin, some people know it as. I finished all my treatments 18 months later. Before that, I went back to work, had a really sort of weird beginning, in as much as I was broken in quite nicely into school. Sorry, I forgot to say I was a science teacher. And this strange woman called Marilyn actually then rang me to say, oh, Fiona, do you fancy actually helping out a little bit by going on to a workshop? Now, Marilyn used to work with me, so it was a definite yes. And what we then did is that we got together, and she told me that she'd actually like to get everybody that was connected to ovarian cancer within CR UK and Cambridge into some sort of workshop. So I presented to that workshop, and it was the first time that I'd actually done some sort of awareness raising. So it was about talking to the researchers, to the clinicians, to anybody who would listen to me about the actual symptoms of ovarian cancer and the effects that it can actually have. Just so you are aware, the awareness of ovarian cancer, there are certain symptoms that you can actually have. So it can be things like feeling quite bloated or not really wanting to eat or going to the toilet too much compared to where you were maybe 6 months before. So it's all about trying to make sure that you know what is normal for you. And when things start to deviate from that, go and talk to the GP. I went because I had a mild pain in my abdomen. Other people have much more severe things, but not necessarily anything that you can pinpoint. The other thing to be aware of is the CA125. Sometimes you have all these symptoms, you go to the GP may not have ovarian cancer on their hit list, but it's really important, even if you get a normal CA125, you go back 6 weeks later just to make sure that it's still not raised if it comes out as a low level. CA125, a normal range is between 1 and 35. So if you get a 17 the first time and then it goes up to 25, it might be an indication that you've got ovarian cancer and it needs looking at. The other thing that happened as a result of my workshop is that I ended up chatting to an awful lot of other people who wanted to make sure that ovarian cancer was on the radar of different people. So as a result of that, I had the great job of being interviewed by the Daily Mail, Woman's Hour on BBC Radio 4, and of various different events, Women's Institute, different workshops, different conferences about my ovarian cancer, but also about what we actually do for the PPI. So the other thing that we have managed to do is we have achieved loads of different things over the past 8 years. One being consent forms. We've reduced the number of consent forms. Another, I won't go into too much detail, but whole genome sequencing. Another one, the demo project. There is a whole range of different things that we have actually managed to achieve as a group and actually helped other people to realize what they need to look for, but also how they can help us.
Amazing, Fiona. That's just such a huge achievement from the very beginnings of this wonderful group and all that you've achieved since. And I know because you've helped me out with my events as well, that you regularly talk at various symposia and you presented a flash talk and a poster at the ICM symposium in 2024. And yeah, it's just so wonderful to have you so engaged. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellie.
Okay, so we're going to move on to Frances. So Frances, tell us a bit about you and then you can go on. What subject are you talking on, Frances?
I'm talking about deeper discovery and development. Thanks, Ellie, for having us all on your podcast. It's the first podcast I've done. So my name's Frances Allen. I live in Northumberland with my husband Simon and my 3 dogs, Piglet, Otter and Mouse, Danny the pony and a few chickens. And I have a related job. I'm a veterinary surgeon, and until recently I was the owner of 2 practices. My story starts back in spring 2023 when, after a very enjoyable skiing holiday, I came back and had a small pain between my ribs. And I thought it was related to a fall when I was trying to keep up with our daughters. And I gave it a couple of weeks, but it hadn't resolved. So I went to the GP surgery, presented to arrange an appointment. And due to a shortage of appointments and a rather bizarre booking system, I was offered an appointment in May, and this was the 27th of February when I went in. So I rather flippantly said, oh, well, I'll be dead or better by then, and out I went. But something still niggled, and I was in the fortunate position with work. I had access to a private online consultation. And the morning of that consultation was the first time I started to feel breathless. And this started the very arduous and lengthy process that led to a diagnosis of a stage 4B high-grade serous ovarian cancer. So that very tiny, it was about 1 centimetre by 1 centimetre, pain in my intercostal muscle was actually the very small in size, but very significant pleural metastases. So the tumour had spread without showing any signs in my abdomen to the inside of my chest wall. And this caused a lot of irritation. So it makes the lining of the muscle, where you normally have a couple of millilitres of fluid, which lubricates the lungs, This lining was very irritated and leeches had developed in this space, causing me difficulty with me breathing. Pleural fluid was drained, and it was such a relief at feeling normal again. My brain was numb to the idea of what had actually caused it, and I trotted off home feeling much better. But unexpectedly, after a couple of days, the fluid refilled, and when I went back in for my second drain, they told me about the presence of the abnormal cells in the fluid. So there were further diagnostic procedures done. I was very thoroughly inspected. It was a diagnosis in reverse, so we knew I had a metastatic disease, but not where the cancer originated. So I had ultrasound, CT scans, biopsies, thoracoscopy, colonoscopy, bloods and urine, and this resulted several weeks later in the diagnosis of the high-grade serous ovarian cancer. This was a very lengthy and disjointed process, not made here in Cambridge, but at the Northern Cancer Care Trust in Newcastle. And this lengthy process propelled me into patient advocacy. It took 11 terrifying weeks from initial presentation, and I presented, I saw an online GP. I went into accident and emergency because I was nearly at a crisis point. But it took me 11 weeks to reach the chemotherapy chair and start some treatment. And along the way, I phoned and visited and emailed and cried my way through many people, trying to understand what was happening to me, what my care would be, and trying to accelerate that care and get started on a treatment pathway. And at that stage, I could see some relatively simple processes that could be put into place, which would help guide this pathway, make it shorter and make it less unpleasant. One of the things that occurred with me is I went to see the gynecologist. So once I'd been moved from the respiratory department where my pleural effusion was being managed, I went to gynae. And then I was told that my slide images hadn't reached the second lab in time. And so I'd missed the MDT. And at a later point, a CT scan had been lost. And that resulted in the delaying of the surgery. And I thought if there was a collaborative platform where all this information could be put together, then this would have stopped that additional delay. The awareness that the terror of diagnosis can be made either worse or more bearable by the manner in which it was managed gave me a sense of purpose in feeding back to the trusts involved in my care. And my care was slightly complicated where I live. The care spanned 3 different trusts, and it wasn't a very cohesive pathway between them. And for all of us in the PPIE group, the experience of navigating a cancer diagnosis and treatment pathway gives us a very unique lived experience and patient perspective. So as part of the investigation that Fiona mentioned about the whole genome sequence, that was carried out on the tumour and on my blood, so the somatic DNA and the germline, the inheritable DNA. And this led me to joining the Genomics England panel, where I met, and you'll hear from her later, Helen White, and she introduced me to the fabulous and formidable Marilyn, and she kindly allowed me to join the Cambridge Patient and Public Involvement and Engagement, the PPIE group. And it's through this group that I've observed and appreciated the discovery and development that occurs here in Cambridge, but also within our group. Since joining the group in 2023, it's given me a lifeline to thriving with an advanced ovarian cancer. So the understanding of other participants and the knowledge that we gain from listening to researchers and clinicians and each other has helped me develop coping strategies and the knowledge to participate in advocacy, both for my own care and for that of others. Being part of the group and meeting these amazing people has been an inspiration, and it's a pillar of strength to meet both in person when we join symposiums and visit Adam Brooks, but also online. So we have a weekly Zoom meeting and we meet and we're sharing our shared experience, but also meeting and talking with the medical health professionals, the researchers and others involved in developing and delivering medical services. So this discovery that the extensive network of people focused on improving our outcomes brings such hope that a diagnosis of ovarian cancer won't bring the same terror in the future that it did to me in 2023. We all wish to see the development of an early screening tool, an early diagnosis to successfully manage this difficult disease. And we've listened to the presentations from various researchers and clinicians, and one was on the use of a falloposcope. So it's a tiny little scope that can fit into the 1 millimeter diameter tube that connects the uterus to the ovary. And it's in this tube that ovarian cancer often starts. This is one idea that's being explored. but a blood test would be a lot more easily managed and adopted as a screening tool. And ovarian cancer presents in over 70% of cases due to the metastatic disease, so where the tumour has spread to, rather than where it started in the ovary. And it would be amazing to have a screening programme like we already do for cervical and breast and bowel and lung cancer. And that would be an enormous step forward in alleviating the devastating effect that this disease has. Discussion within the group with types of screening we would participate in can help guide researchers to work on acceptable levels of intrusion and to gain this information. And use of something like a tampon device will be far more acceptable, and therefore the uptake will be greater than the scoping technique. And this was discussed at one of the symposia we attended by Professor Emma Crosby and used to detect endometrial cancer cells. So this patient perspective can help guide development into areas that would bring more clinical benefit. And you can develop a very accurate screening test, but if there was minimal uptake, then the benefit would be small. So referring back to my own time and the disjointed initial care, the development of an integrated platform to store all relevant information, so the bloods and the scans and the examinations and the pathology reports and the genetic data, is a huge step forward. And remembering my awkward journey, this would have alleviated a lot of that stress and happiness. So this platform categorises the data according to its source. So there's a tab for scans, a tab for bloods, a tab for examinations, and this can be accessed by all the relevant medical professionals involved in that person's care. And this was a collaboration between Cambridge, and then it's now marketed through GE Healthcare. And I would love to see that employed in all trusts or a similar process. I remember I was visiting my daughter, she lives in Cumbria, and we went to Ray Castle while I was waiting for my surgery date to be confirmed. Cumbria, very beautiful, but the radio connectivity isn't ideal. So I was walking around with my phone trying to keep a signal. And normally the phone calls would happen bang on 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock as prescribed. And 2 hours later, I was still trying to keep the phone signal. And when I eventually heard from a clinician, the words, "We've lost your scan and you missed the MDT and we're going to delay your surgery," caused a huge amount of distress. And this platform, Oncocare, would have prevented all of that. So I have approached the trust that I'm under and recommended its use, and are still waiting for the uptake to occur. One of the other developments we saw was the use of AI in the diagnosis and the prognostication of ovarian cancer. And it's a much needed tool to try and help accelerate the progress made and minimise the waiting time for the results. And it is a long time when you're waiting for a scan or a blood that's either monitoring that you're still in that no evidence of disease situation, or that you're waiting to see whether you're eligible to start a trial or to have further treatment or to have surgery. So we learned through the development of AI of digital twins, where a virtual copy is made of the patient using all their collected data. And this can be used to help compare what happens to patients with similar characteristics when different treatments were used. And this is especially valuable in ovarian cancer, when we can have relatively small groups of patients, but with very variable tumours at each location or at a different hospital. And on being asked at one of the conferences on how we feel about the use of AI being used in our care, we were able to promote its responsible, monitored use to speed up the assessment of scans, to predict a response to treatment, and to be employed in selection of patients suitable for trials. So learning through the panel of both proposed research and hearing of the progress being made gives us great reassurance that our disease is being investigated and researched, despite it being such a complex one with many challenges to produce actionable outcomes. To be involved with the development of solutions does give great satisfaction. And during my first year, I enjoyed a previously very uncomplicated, enjoyable life. I was fit and healthy and productive. And I had my career as a veterinary surgeon. I owned 2 practices, and I did miss the sense of purpose when I was being treated in my initial treatment programme. And being part of the PPIE group is immensely important and valuable to me. So we're very grateful to be able to join it. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Frances. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And the platform that you mentioned, which is called OncoCare, and is now, they've just changed the name, it's called Care and Select for Oncology. And actually, just for my listeners, there is a podcast earlier on in my series with members of that team and members from GE Healthcare, where they talk about the platform and the progress that's being made. So if you want to look that up, that's there in the list. But thank you so much for sharing your story, and I really hope we can get it right for people in the future, because that it just sounds just dreadful to be so disjointed at such a scary time. It's just, yeah, it must have not helped you in any way at all. And I hope that our work will get that right, or more right, for those that come after you. Thank you. I'm going to move on to Helen. So Helen, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and then tell us what topic you're covering, please.
Sure, thank you, and thank you for inviting me today. Yes, so hello, I'm Helen White, and I'll be talking a little bit about insight and impact that this group has. So I joined this group over 5 years ago now. That was after being diagnosed with what was a high-grade endometrial cancer. Endometrial cancer is also known as womb or uterine cancer, which can confuse a few people. My only symptom, I was well, other than just chaotic vaginal bleeding and persistent discharge, which I frankly put down to perimenopause. I was in my early 50s and menopause was approaching. Fortunately, when I went to see my GP, she sent me for an ultrasound scan, and that picked up something going on in my womb. So I am very grateful to her, really, for that. It meant, I mean, a lot of womb cancers are diagnosed at an early stage anyway, but I think particularly with mine, I could have dragged my heels, or the GP could potentially have buffed me off with suggesting it was to do with menopause approaching. But fortunately, my cancer was detected at a low stage, which meant it hadn't spread very far. So actually, I was very lucky in that I only needed surgical treatment. There's an interesting sort of outcome, though, is that a couple of years later, I discovered this thing called Lynch syndrome, which is a genetic condition that increases the risk of getting several cancers, including womb cancer. And so I went through NHS testing for that and discovered that I do have Lynch syndrome. Here I am now, I'm 8 years down the line since my cancer diagnosis. And actually now, because I know I do have Lynch syndrome, it means that there are things I can do to reduce my risk of getting other cancers. So bowel cancer is the most common one. So I now have colonoscopies every couple of years just to make sure that there's nothing growing that I don't know about. So that's very reassuring, and I'm very grateful to that. So on to insight. As the others have already said, being part of this group means we're really fortunate. We get to hear and learn so much about the gynecological cancer research going on. And I would say that we get really valuable insight into what's happening in the research world. And I think I can speak for everyone here and within the wider group to say that I think we're genuinely inspired by what we hear. But in turn, we share our own insights. That's a really important part of this PPI group. What it's like to be diagnosed with one of these cancers, what it's like to live with and beyond these cancers, and the impact that it has on our families. And that's really key, because it helps the researchers understand what truly matters most to us. And that leads me nicely on to impact. And as Fiona mentioned, our group has had a big impact in many different ways through our involvement in various research projects, including things like being co-applicants on research grants, reviewing study protocols, providing feedback on patient-facing materials. We've also helped engage the wider public in the research that's going on. That's the E bit of the PPIE acronym. And as Fiona described, several members of this group have featured across a range of media platforms, done some incredible videos, and done a lot to actually tell the wider public about the research and also the importance of our involvement in that research. But I just wanted to focus here on one specific example that I was involved in where we had an impact, which was now about 4 years ago. So following on from the 100,000 Genomes Project, so that was a big research project in England where people with all sorts of cancers, including ovarian cancer, generously donated their genomes and their health data to something called the National Genomic Research Library. And the research team followed on from this. The research team at Cambridge submitted an application for this whole genome sequencing test of high-grade ovarian cancer to be included in the National Genomic Test Directory. So if that was successful, it would mean that people with high-grade ovarian cancer would be offered whole genome or could be offered whole genome sequencing on the NHS. And that would give doctors more detailed information about their tumour's specific genetic makeup and about any inherited gene changes that might have caused the cancer. Unfortunately, that application was rejected, and Mary-Lynn invited us to write a letter. And so a group of us, including some of us speaking here today, sadly, some no longer with us, we compiled a letter explaining to the deciding body, whoever that was, why we felt this testing was so important to people with high-grade ovarian cancer. In this, I mean, I've gone back and found a copy of that letter, and just to summarise, in that we emphasise that a diagnosis of high-grade ovarian cancer is a truly devastating diagnosis, with many people not surviving beyond 5 years. This was very fresh in our minds, and we included that one member of our group at that time had just gone into palliative care. Another one had just literally come out of hospital, having spent 5 weeks recovering from some really severe side effects. So we really wanted to underline that real urgent need for better treatment options. We pointed out that whole genome sequencing could be useful to identify those inherited gene changes beyond those included in standard panels, which is so important to us for allowing our family members to be tested and take preventative measures themselves, so potentially sparing future generations from the same disease. And we underline the importance of adding more genomes to the National Genomic Research Library, because the more data sits in that library, the more research is accelerated, more knowledge is built, and there'd be more work towards more effective and personalised treatments. I think critically, we finished that letter by saying that making whole genome sequencing available in NHS would actually offer real hope to patients. It would save lives and potentially maybe would even reduce costs in the long term. And we were delighted when that letter did the trick. Whole genome sequencing for high-grade ovarian cancer was added to the National Genomic Test Directory, first as a pilot here at Cambridge and then later as standard care. There's a bit of a big caveat around that, because not all people with high-grade ovarian cancer are currently being offered whole genome sequencing, and there's a number of reasons for that. But even so, that letter did have a massive impact, and actually including some of those in the group today have been through NHS testing for whole genome sequencing, and it's identified changes that have been highly relevant to them, their family, and their treatment. So essentially, I mean, just to summarise the impact, definitely having this whole genome sequencing available has definitely detected in some people inherited gene changes that otherwise wouldn't have been found. Researchers are gaining much better understanding of ovarian cancer, particularly including why some people don't respond to certain treatments. So, that obviously means that those treatments can be avoided in those people and all the nasty side effects that come from them. So, this is working towards treatment being more tailored to the individual. Also, all those people who've really kindly donated their data from the 100,000 Genomes Project and beyond, now it's being offered the NHS, are helping to create the largest data set of high-grade ovarian cancers in the world, which is accessible not just to researchers in Cambridge, but to any approved researcher worldwide. And just to finish off, very recently, there's been a Future Learn online course called The Power of Patient Advocacy in Genomics. That's just been released, and included in that has been this example. It's been included in that as a powerful example of how patient and public involvement has had real world impact. So it's really demonstrated how our voice has helped pave the way for better outcomes for those who come after us. And I, for one, am certainly very proud of what we've achieved together.
And so you should be, Helen. That is just such a wonderful, positive story. I'm so happy that you shared that with us. And if I may, I will share the link to the course in the blurb for the podcast, because I think that would be great. So thank you very much. And now we're going to hand on to Mel. So Mel, tell us about your story and then the topic that you're going to share with us, please.
Hi, thank you. Yes, hi, I'm Mel Newman, and it was, 7 years ago now that I had my diagnosis. So I was 55 years old, menopausal, and whilst I would say I wasn't getting any symptoms, I was, but I was writing them off as part of the menopause. So anything that was happening to me, I was sort of passing it off. I was working full time, busy sort of family, husband, two grown-up girls and animals, and I was, to my mind, fit and healthy and active and just getting on with life. But then the pain started, and it wasn't until that abdomen pain got really severe and it would literally stop me in my tracks that it made me go to my GP. Because prior to that, I was just passing things off, like with the toilet, needing to go to have a wee more frequently. I was, got to get a grip of this, or else I'll never get out of the house. Yeah, just putting it down to age. So fortunately, that sort of abdominal pain and the need to be away with work later in the week. And I thought, if I'm in a hotel on my own and this is something serious, I've nobody to call to. So I went to the GP, and I never did go on that work trip because fortunately, she did the CA125 blood test. And the next day the call came, it could be inflammation, but it could be cancer. And from there, I was just fast tracked to Addenbrooke's. So I feel very fortunate that there was no time wasted with my GP. I regret the time that I wasted ignoring symptoms. But fortunately, yes, with coming to Addenbrooke's and having the opportunity of sort of all the different tests, it was diagnosed as stage 3 high-grade serous ovarian cancer. Massive shock for us all. But the girls are so positive, and they're like, right, we're going to get through this, Mum. And we'd have a playlist every time before my hospital appointments. We'd dance around the kitchen, lots of positive energy. Telling my 92-year-old mother was quite a different story. But thanks to our girls, they kept me buoyant, and same for my husband. And on my birthday, I received my treatment plan. Best birthday present ever, to think that I could go forward for treatment. It involved chemotherapy every 3 weeks, 18 cycles of chemo all day, having the treatment, and lots of different scans and tests and opportunities to take part in different studies. And it's thanks to those studies as well that enabled me to go forward for the surgery. Because my cancer had spread, there was a pancreatic node and it was in my lymph nodes. Clinicians were never quite sure if would the surgery be beneficial, because if they couldn't reach the node on the pancreas, why put me through the surgery for the ovarian mass? Well, thankfully, I did an MRI study and it showed that the node on my pancreas was now dead tissue, thanks to the chemo. And as I say, thankfully, I could go forward for the surgery. It's everybody coming together and that amazing surgeon removing all of the disease that it gives you such a good chance of, we pray the disease doesn't return. So, as I say, lots of chemotherapy. But unfortunately, when I stopped the chemo, 6 months later, the cancer was returning. It was all very well managed, and I was back on the chemo for 6 more cycles. Thankfully, responded really well. And that enabled me to go forward for another trial with PARP inhibitors. And these are an amazing drug that we hope keeps the cancer away. It sort of attacks the cancer cell before it has a chance to take hold and start growing. And now for 4 years, I've been on those PARP inhibitors, 2 different types of drugs, which long may they continue to work. So I'm checked by Addenbrooke's every 2 months, all my bloods, and 6 monthly CT scans. And I feel very privileged that I can be so thoroughly looked after. So yes, have to remain positive and just think, 7 years down the line and I'm still here. So very grateful to everybody who's involved. And meeting sort of friends for the PPI group, it keeps that connectivity. And so my areas of experience and empowerment, and I think us all coming together in our collective knowledge. And whilst we've all had sort of a gynae cancer diagnosis in the main ovarian cancer, everybody's experience and treatment plan is different. And they have to hold on to that thought, is that it is different for everybody. And it means from coming together, I'm learning so much more about the disease and my body and all these different variables to consider. It's helpful also, so helpful. I mean, some of the ladies are so dedicated to doing the sourcing different research and sharing that knowledge. And yeah, it just helps us become more informed than I would be if I was on my own. And I think sort of coming together and our experience sort of from our life skills, the challenges and the positivity that everybody brings, it gives us a chance to sort of ease some of those concerns and fears that we might have, because you've got to face up to these things. I think sometimes it's a little bit scary what you're hearing, but and what you're experiencing together is very scary. But I think there's no point burying my head in the sand and rather build that practical knowledge. So it's great that we have the time to talk, support and solve problems together that we may face. And having that better understanding, it often raises further questions in the group and together supports a curious mind. And brilliantly, Lorraine is particularly good at asking questions, and this helps me enormously. And I think that anything helps me manage myself in times of uncertainty and anxiety, gives me a place to ask questions and share my concerns is a huge benefit. So those shared experiences are not only a valuable resource, but knowing each other in the way that we do creates support and friendship like no other. And particularly sort of the questions I might have, I wouldn't wish to share with my family. It would worry them and also perhaps think I'm not telling them everything about sort of my condition. So huge benefit there. And I think sort of in the PPIE group, often somebody's already experienced a similar emotion or concern. And together sort of we all do feel the loss of friends from the group. And as Linda said of dearest Barbara, like she had the greatest understanding of all of us as we tried to plot our own path through life. And it's that understanding that comes from experience that's so valuable. And as I say, gives us a chance to deepen our understanding. We're very fortunate to have Marilyn leading our group, and we've had so many opportunities to contribute to funding applications, present to research students, medical students, get involved in raising awareness on television, radio, podcasts, and so much more. And one particular piece of engagement was the demo project. And there was myself and Margaret, who's sadly no longer with us. We were involved with ovarian cancer patients and healthcare professionals in Birmingham. So it's a collaborative piece of work. And the aim was to raise awareness of the symptoms and importance of early detection. And this was specifically aimed at ethnic minority groups and provide access to information in their language, which was so important. And although it was clear sort of from the members that for some women, it was not part of their culture to share health concerns with their family. And this meant female family members may not get tested for any genetic diseases. It was a very inclusive bit of work, and it resulted in the creation of an animated information video, very accessible and, as I say, inclusive. And it was really empowering to be part of this project. And in terms of that empowerment, I feel our strength grows from being together and sharing the joy and successes of trials, but also, sadly, the losses. But we know we must carry on for those who went before. And we all want to give something back, and just so very grateful for the life that we have, and we feel empowered to speak up, not just to raise awareness of the disease and symptoms, but also to show those dedicated to research that their work is making such a difference and extending and saving lives. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mel. And I've just been writing some notes while you've all been talking, and the first thing I wrote is knowledge is power. And I just feel that, through discussing and talking with each other and finding out things, I get this huge feeling of empowerment from this group, not only empowering yourselves and each other, but also the researchers and then, anyone who's interested. And for those who come after, as you say, you're just leaving such an amazing legacy by being involved with us. And yeah, we're just so, so grateful for your continued participation. It is completely wonderful. Thank you. So, right, next I am going to Carol. And Carol, please tell us a little bit about you and your story and then your topic.
Thank you. Yes. Hi, I'm Carol Smith, and I feel mine is a good news story. October 2019, I found a lump in my groin. It wasn't there the day before. It was probably the size of a squashed kiwi fruit, if you can imagine. So very strange to suddenly get something like that. It felt quite large. I'd needed to go for a pee a bit more often, but nothing untoward really before that. No other symptoms. I was very lucky, and I saw my GP later that morning, and he ordered blood tests and was referring me down the gastro route, which I didn't really understand, but he knew best. Anyway, 2 days later, the CA125 results showed that were elevated. It was actually on 217, and as Fiona said before, anything over 35 sort of causes a bit of alarm. And so then the route I was going down was changed to the gynae route. I had a CT scan, and it showed I had cysts on both my ovaries. The first thing I had was surgery, and I went straight to surgery in early December, and I had total debulking surgery, not particularly pleasant. And Mr. Baldwin kindly said that he'd got everything. He was delighted to tell me he'd got everything, which was lovely news. So then I had a follow-up CT scan at the end of December, and my meeting with Christine Parkinson, my consultant, unfortunately said that there were signs of cancer. It was highly concerning because of all the surgery that I'd had. And so I went on the chemotherapy route from there. It was 6 rounds of carboplatin, paclitaxel, the standard treatment. And I started that on the 9th of January, 2020. I had two rounds, and then the sort of hiatus of COVID hit really hard. It was a strange time to be going to hospital because you were told not to go to hospital unless you had to. It was a dangerous place to be, but yes, I had to go to hospital. But I was very lucky in that I actually got all 6 rounds in, because there was doubt at some point during this time that everybody would get all their chemo. But I was very lucky, and I got all 6. One day I was driving into Addenbrooke's first thing in the morning, had to be there for about 8 o'clock, and I was the only car on the A14, which I thought was wonderful. No, not a soul in sight. Good old COVID. Anyhow, the CT scan that followed that was May 2020, and to my relief, it was all clear. I was then offered the Athena Duo trial. And because there was no signs of cancer, and I had stood up okay to the chemotherapy, I had side effects, but nothing too bad, I could go on the Athena trial. It was a 4-arm trial, and it was to see whether immunotherapy drugs alongside the PARP inhibitors would have any impact on results. It meant tablets twice a day and also an infusion every 4 weeks. So there was an 80% chance I'd get the PARP and a 20% chance I'd get the immunotherapy drug. And Lorraine, who you're going to hear from as well, she was also on the same trial. I didn't know that at the time, though. I finished the trial in 2020, and I'd had lots of checkups in the meantime, lots of scans, lots of blood tests, and everything had been clear. I actually had 20 CT scans in the end, and they were all clear, which was fantastic. My CA125 range has always been between 9 and 12 right the way through. A few months ago, the trial was actually unblinded, and having been convinced I was receiving the PARP, but not the immunotherapy drug, I was told I had in fact received placebos for both. Well, I was so shocked. I had to go for a long walk in the countryside, and all I could think of was how much time had been involved. There was bloods on a Tuesday, phone call on a Wednesday, infusion on a Thursday. So our whole life had been organised around these arrangements. I didn't regret it at all, and I would certainly do another trial, but it's just an issue for people to think about when you ask somebody to go on the trial and then they actually don't get the drug. Also, all the whole time we're always told we were in the vulnerable group, highly vulnerable group. You had to take care. So I had avoided lots of social events. I'd gone to funerals, but not sort of mixed with the people and gone home straight away afterwards. All sorts of things that I felt I had missed out on during the time. But as I say, I would still do another trial. About 3 years ago, my consultant said there's a group you might find you like to be involved in. And I think it was really because I asked so many questions. Every time I met her or spoke to her on the telephone, I'd have a long list of questions and we'd have to go through and tick everything off as she answered everything to my satisfaction. So I contacted Mary Lynn and was delighted to join the group, actually. My first meeting was a little strange because I had never talked about my cancer to anybody but my husband and one other person. All my family are up in Cheshire. I'm here in Cambridge, and as they were a long way away, it was COVID. It was very easy to just say I was having chemo to be on the safe side. No problems really, Mum, who's now 96. No problems really, Mum. Yeah, doing all right. Yeah. And that was how it went for most of the time, really, and still does, actually, to be honest, really. COVID was also useful because it meant my family never saw me go bald, which was a bonus. I had a wonderful wig, and everybody in the village wanted to know why I had such smart hair when they all had scruffy hair and couldn't go to the dentist, but we didn't tell them why. It was a shock to me to be talking about myself and my cancer, and it still is, to be fair, it still is. But the ladies I met on my first meeting were very kind. The way the meeting works is that, oh, you're new, you introduce yourself to everybody. So the first time I'd ever talked about it was on this meeting. So I thought, oh dear, I'm not sure I like all this. And then everybody else talked about theirs. I'm thinking, oh gosh, this is going to be hard work. But however, once you got over the initial shock of hearing how everybody was, you realised it was actually very, very good to know what's going on elsewhere. My letters I'm talking about is S for support and sharing. And we take support from each other and we give support back. Very obvious. We listen to each other, again, very obvious. And we hear about updates. We celebrate our good news, but we also bolster each other through when there's some bad news. And we are a close-knit group, but happy to welcome new members. And we had Prema join us only a couple of weeks ago. We would not be as effective without Mary Lynn. And I look forward to hearing how other PPIE groups go and how their organisers manage to invigorate, excite all the ladies in their group, because that's exactly what Mary Lynn does for us. The ladies speaking today are in the more mature group. You won't be able to see them, but believe me, we are. I'm actually the oldest. Only one of us here is under 60. That's Francis, by the way. But this is not just a disease for the over 60s. There are teenagers, those in their 20s and 30s, who also get the disease, which is very, very frightening. And so I think that ought to be borne in mind by the people who are listening. Don't just think it's for old people. Through the support of this group, I've gained loads of confidence. You might not think it, but I have, to support others. And I get great satisfaction from the work we do with researchers on their presentations and their projects. And I find it incredible that some of these researchers may never meet the patients for whom they are doing the work, to hear how much we appreciate what they do, but also to see the impact that they have. We support each other at the symposia, which is fantastic. And Fiona and I attended a science day. That was quite exciting too, because we were talking to the public then about ovarian cancer and cancer in general. My neighbour of over 40 years knocked on my door one day and said, I've got ovarian cancer. Is it what you've had? And I said, come in. And so through the support of this group, I actually was able to talk to her as well. I helped her through all her treatment by just listening, by suggesting what she asked the consultant. Don't tell anybody, it wasn't Dr. Parkinson. And so again, there's another side to things for support. We can support other patients. Sadly, my neighbour died last year, heartbroken in our little area because it's changed the dynamics at home. But there's the village is quite large, and there's another lady now who has ovarian cancer too. So I talked to her. Sadly, some of the ladies of our group I know that have been here a while are no longer with us. We've actually lost 6 in just over a year. And it's fantastic to hear that family members of some of those ladies are still involved in the group. And that's the family link that is so important to us patients, the support we get from families and other families as well. We share our news. Yes, we share photos of grandchildren, holidays, graduation, fundraising events. And for me, it was my 50th wedding anniversary. All these things, none of us were 100% sure we would see. And so they're celebrated by all of us. We share our own experiences, anything to help others. We share developments of new drugs and treatments. And Linda is the ace in our pack here. She finds things online that, I don't know, from all over the world, but particularly America. And she shares those with us. She has a knack of finding new developments. And there's one more S I would add, and that's special. And I think that these ladies are very special. They give their time. And I think it was Shirley who said, and sadly Shirley's no longer with us, but she said, and this is really as a message to PPIs and to researchers, that some patients in these groups may sadly have life-limiting illnesses, and they may not always want to be or be in a position to contribute, and that everybody should remember that. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. And I just wanted to say I'm someone who asks lots of questions as well. And I love that you do that because no doubt somebody else will have that same question. So keep asking loads of questions. That's wonderful. And also, I think you're amazingly confident. You are all amazingly confident. You speak so eloquently about your disease and your journeys and your treatment and research and how you want to be involved. You know, it's just fantastic. I love listening to you. I could have talked to you all evening. But sadly, we are coming to a close. We have Lorraine is going to take the last slot to tell us. So, Lorraine, you're going to tell us a little bit about your story and the last letter that you're going to tell us about. And then the final word will go to Simon, who is Shirley's husband. And he's just going to give us a final conclusion. So, Lorraine, over to you.
Hi, my name is Lorraine, and I'm going to talk to you about legacy, what it means to us ladies, and the impact it has on us. But before that, I'll give you a wee bit about myself. I'm a mother of one son, Colin, and he's given me 4 beautiful grandchildren. I've got 3 big sisters, a wee brother and a wee sister. Brother lives in Estonia, sisters live still up in Scotland, and I'm married to John, who's just retired. I was always running my life at 100 miles an hour, and at one point I had 3 jobs at the same time, and that was driving an ambulance, running a hotel and driving a taxi on my day off. My life was ticking along nicely, but I started having bladder problems and bowel problems and chronic indigestion, and I had several doctor visits, lots of x-rays, ultrasound scans, and I was diagnosed with gallstones, and I thought, oh, that's good. I wasn't worried about anything, but it was great to know what it was. Between my first visit to the doctor and all the investigations, it was well over a year, and before I was diagnosed with high-grade serous ovarian cancer, grade 3. And that was only after the gallbladder surgeon said, I want a CT scan because I like a roadmap. And once the scan came back, all hell broke loose. I was told that they see something suspicious. We need a biopsy. Could be this, could be that, but we better make sure. So I had a biopsy one Friday. And when I woke up, the surgeon, who was a fantastic surgeon, said, I've booked you in next week because you need major surgery. And it was I didn't have time to think about what it could be or anything like that. I was never worried about it being cancer, as I had a hysterectomy when I was only 32. And I thought there can't be much left, because I was under the impression they'd removed absolutely everything, especially my ovaries and my fallopian tubes. And when I was told it was ovarian cancer, I still wasn't really worried about it, because I'd never heard of it, to be honest. And I said, surely it can't be serious anyway. But I was wrong. I was lucky enough to be offered a trial, and as Carol said, I was on the same trial as her, and I grabbed it with both hands. I started the trial after having 8 rounds of chemotherapy, and it was 5 of chemo and paclitaxel and 3 of just carboplatin on its own. And I started the trial in June 2020. It wasn't an easy journey, I'll be honest with you. I had a bowel obstruction in the height of COVID. I had neutropenic sepsis in the height of COVID. And then just at the end of COVID, I had encephalitis due to the immunotherapy that I was on. And I'll be honest with you, that was worse than the cancer operation and the chemo. I'm now deaf in 1 ear. I have memory loss. This is why I'm having to write this down. I had to learn to walk again, and I was in a wheelchair for 2 years. I now have to plan things with military precision if I go out. How far do I need to walk? Will there be a trolley I can at least hang on to? And of course, where's the nearest toilet? And worst of all, I can't leave the house on my own, as I suffer dizzy spells and I'm still sometimes unsteady on my feet. But I still feel very, very lucky to be alive and chatting to you today. Believe it or not, it's 6 years down the line. And although I suffered, I'm here because of the opportunity to go in a trial. And I would go again in a heartbeat. If I was offered another trial, I would grab it. I joined this wonderful PPIE group after being invited by Marilyn, who works tirelessly to make this group what it is and keeps us ladies organised, which we do need sometimes. And she deserves a medal for that alone. Now, I didn't know what to expect when I joined this group, who were all in this women who were in the same group as myself. Would it be a moaning group? If so, I'm out of there. Would it be a gossip group? Oh, no, if it's that, I'm out of there. No, this group of wonderful women are inspirational, wonderful, excuse me, kind, and ooze of strength and empathy. It plays a big part in my life, and no matter where I am in the country and where the other ladies are in the country or even the world, we always try and join a meeting on a Tuesday. Sometimes we have guest speakers who can be researchers, clinicians, and they're looking for our help as they want to speak to women with ovarian cancer and try and get it from the human side and not just all facts and figures. That sometimes, I have to admit, the facts and figures go right over my head, but we have wonderful ladies who explain it, and that's why I ask all the questions to see if it sinks in. Now, I'm going to talk to you about legacy. We all want to leave a legacy when we go, and I'm sorry, I won't be leaving any money or any riches. I'm not wealthy, but despite everything, I class myself as relatively healthy, and the legacy I want to leave behind is my positivity, my empathy, my experience, and whatever support that gives others. Also, I'm put in a few groups. I'm part of the Cambridge Cancer Research Hospital, Patient Advisory Group, the Clinical Research Participation Project, and the BritRock 2 Research Programme. I was also part of the CPPG, but unfortunately that was disbanded overnight due to lack of funding. I'm sure I'm volunteered to other groups, and I'm sorry if I haven't mentioned it, but I volunteer for everything. Nobody wants to be forgotten, and we all hope that we've had a long-lasting impact on those around us. Family, friends, surgeons and clinicians all genuinely want to understand and help us. But in reality, the only people who fully understand what it is to be fighting ovarian cancer are those of us who are actually doing it. And by joining this group, I feel that we're able to make valid contributions in terms of experience, advice, support to others, and it will hopefully be felt for a long time to come. Sadly, as Carol said, we've lost a few ladies in the group. Margaret, she was my partner in crime. We would FaceTime each other regularly and we laughed a lot. She would regale stories of her job as a border control agent at Heathrow Airport. I was fascinated with that. Rona, we would FaceTime regularly. She was a fellow Scot and we would always reminisce about Scotland, plus the things we had in common, like working in the tourism industry and the hospitality industry. Lynn was a very private lady, but she joined the group and she thoroughly enjoyed it. Brenda, she was a straight talker and she opened my eyes several times to what lies ahead. Shirley worked as a clinical scientist and she helped us all immensely understand the scientific terminology, especially me. Barbara was a Macmillan nurse and was very caring with all of us and offered her love and support. And all these ladies will be sadly missed. These wonderful ladies were all generous with their time, their kindness and their support. They all worked hard to ensure the group was successful, and if it all impacted on our lives and the lives and hearts and memories of their families and friends. Apart from all my positivity, my legacy will be all the stories I've managed to get out online for women of the future. I will shout it from the rooftops if it helps women become aware of ovarian cancer. And I've done that by being in the Scottish newspapers. I was also interviewed for the ITV News about my diagnosis. And I'm afraid my acting skills of lifting my box of letters will win no awards. But I done my bit. Doing a podcast about how AI will be used in the future. My yearly updates and the other ladies in the group's yearly updates on the CR UK website. My local hospital even has me on a video getting port care done to show the newly diagnosed ovarian cancer patients how easy it is to be maintained. This will hopefully help make them choices to receive treatment. We hope that we all make a difference for the future. In the early days of diagnostic statistics were not great, but now statistics are showing us that getting past the 5-year mark is increasing consistently, which gives you a different outlook on life and gives you hope for the future. But still, 1 in 50 women are affected by ovarian cancer. Although statistics are changing for the better, very slowly changing, this is my reason and the wonderful ladies' reasons for joining this group, to help make a difference for women in the future, as this is a legacy we all want to leave behind, making a difference. I'm going to end now by talking about an inspirational woman who had ovarian cancer. Her name was Jenny Godley, and you may know her. She was a Scottish comedian who'd done the funny voiceovers of Nicola Sturgeon on the daily updates during COVID, and I've just sat and watched all her videos again. Nicola Sturgeon said she didn't mind her funny voiceovers, as Jenny was getting the point across, but she could say things that Nicola couldn't. They were very funny. Jenny was diagnosed with ovarian cancer stage 3, and she decided the best way to let everyone know about ovarian cancer was to get on the road. So she went on tour, and I was lucky enough to go and see her. She even arranged to have her chemo in the towns where she was doing her show. At the start of all her shows, she would talk about her cancer. And you may think that's not very funny, but she was very funny. Coarse language, but very funny. And she would throw out statistics about ovarian cancer to warn women in the audience at the beginning of her show. Then she got on to entertaining. She made a big impact on women all over the country, and she's the reason women in Scotland are more aware of ovarian cancer. She made a big impact on me. I admired Jenny. She made funny videos, entertained in theatres, and she was on the road until the doctors told her to cancel the rest of her road trip, which she was shocked at. And sadly, she passed away just a few weeks later. What a legacy she has left behind. Several things for her show remain with me, and I repeat them quite often. She said she was sick and fed up of people saying, cheer up, you can get run over by a bus tomorrow. That was said to me the other day. The difference is you don't know you're going to get run over by a bus tomorrow. But with ovarian cancer, not only do you know the bus is coming, but it's constantly chasing you. On that note, as Janie so eloquently put it at the end of her Nicola Sturgeon videos, Frank, get the door. Thank you for listening to me.
Oh, Lorraine, I just want to reach out and give you the biggest hug. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Everyone says this group has its ups and downs and it's a roller coaster.
That was difficult to get through, but I'm glad I get through it.
You've just lived that roller coaster in front of us, and I am so grateful to you for sharing that with us. Thank you so much. And as I said, I'm going to finally pass over to Shirley's husband, Simon, for a final roundup and summary of what being involved in this group has meant to Shirley and to you, Simon. So if you can, over to you.
Hello, I'm Simon, I'm Shirley's husband, and I'd like to thank you so much for inviting me to such an impressive and emotional presentation. I think you're all incredibly brave to be prepared to tell your own personal journey. It must have been very tough for you, and it certainly resonated with me. I think you're a terrific group. I think you're an absolute aspirational role model for other groups in the country to copy. Now, during the presentations, I just jotted down a few words and descriptions. So I came up with sincere, articulate, interesting, brave, inspiring, insightful, humbling, and moving. But I realize I've missed two words or one hyphenated word, and that's Marilyn. So thanks again for inviting me.
Simon, thank you so much. I am not going to say anything else because you've said it the best of all. I just want to say thank you to all of you and Marilyn for being involved with me and what I do in the Integrated Cancer Medicine Programme and all of the places you touch our research. You are just wonderful. So thank you.